Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Wrestling Academy. I am your headmaster. My name is Michael, and with me is the self-appointed Homecoming King, Samee Junio. Samee, how are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing good. I'll be honest with you.
Mm,
I rewatched the episode we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and I
yes.
am so unbelievably juiced up on 90s melodrama, and I'm raring to go. But before we get into it, let me just say this is Wrestling Academy. We're a
Hello,
brand new
welcome.
podcast, and basically the premise is if you're new to wrestling and Samee, you could attest. You're a newer wrestling fan, and it can be
Hmm.
kind of confusing on where to
Very.
start and how to get into it. Who's who? What's the WWF? What's AEW?
Hmm.
What's WCW? Are they all the same thing? Do they know each other? Are they friends?
Are
And the
they
answer to
friends?
that is rarely. No, there's rarely is there friendship in wrestling, but basically what we're gonna do. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and my favorite thing to do is get new people into wrestling. So you're basically watching a live journey of Samee becoming a new fan into a grizzled old veteran who's going to have tons of opinions on CM Punk or whatever in about a
Oof.
year's time. But for now, you're brand new
Brand new.
opinions, and
Hmm.
I just want to introduce you to my favorite thing in the world, wrestling.
Right.
So I guess I just want to ask you, since you're a new wrestling fan, what was your journey into getting into wrestling? Did you like it as a kid, or did you not like it, or what was going on there?
So I grew up in the 90s, and the whole thing about wrestling was you would either be a fan of it or you would write it off as fake and go about your day. Unfortunately, I wrote it off as fake and went about my day. Um, but I was quickly corrected. Not quickly, but eventually corrected.
Took a
I
couple of decades.
it took 2 decades, and I was working with somebody, and he's a huge wrestling fan. We did a wrestling edition of our comedy show, Historical Roasts, and he was like, okay, you need to make a playlist of entrances of wrestlers for when the audience loads in. And he was like, make sure you put Shinsuke Nakamura's theme song on this playlist. I was like, okay, dude, whatever. And then I played it, and it changed me. Like, I felt my body change when those strings go "Wee!" Like, I listened to the song over and over again for days after, and I was my fandom, like, becoming a fan, I was close, but I didn't have a guide to get me further in. So, when I met you and you invited me to a GCW match in Los Angeles, California, that was it. That's all I needed.
Yeah, and I just want to say, like, hearing as soon as you said he recommended the Shinsuke Nakamura theme song, my first thought was, "Damn, that's a good friend. That's a really
Yeah,
good friend."
yeah.
If I could recommend another one, I don't know if it was on your playlist or not, but "Glorious Domination," the Bobby
Mm,
Roode theme song. Highly
no.
recommend you check it out.
Okay.
First bit of homework.
Okay, thank you so much.
But okay, so I ended up taking you to a live event,
Mhm.
GCW's Game Changer Wrestling, and a lot of what they do is they have a lot more hardcore and weapons based wrestling, and so I any sort of preconceptions that you had that maybe went away, or was there anything that just immediately won you over?
I think the group energy really tied me into it, and it was also really helpful. I don't know if you remember this, but once I arrived, you were kind of just filling me in on all of the wrestlers that we were going to see, some of their gimmicks and stuff. And so with you telling me what was going on, and then the match started, and then everybody as a group was just it was like group thought of shout, and we all were shouting the exact same things because they're always like what 3 to 4 words in a very recognizable rhythm, and it was so easy to just come in and go with the flow and not have to be like nervous if I'm doing it wrong or right, because like you watch it that's the way to do it right, is you watch it and you shout. And it was really good.
Yeah, I think as long as you're present, then you're good. I mean, there are definitely, don't get me wrong, when you go to live shows, there are definitely wrestling fans who love to, it's called hijacking, where they
Mm.
want to start a chant and be obnoxious or troll a little bit, or calling for excessive violence when perhaps that's not what's going on in the ring or whatever. It's called hijacking. So it's, that element definitely exists. But I think for the most part, majority of wrestling fans are cool, especially in a live setting. So you you go and you have fun, and it's real easy to get on board. Like I remember going and seeing Rocky Horror Picture Show when I was a kid.
Hmm.
There's so much complex chanting and stuff
Yeah.
that I was a little bit confused. So breaking it down to just 3 words, very easy to yell GC dub. You know what I mean? Like
GC dub, this is awesome. Like, you sick
fight
fuck.
forever, you sick
Right.
fuck, you fucked up is a good one. Please,
Uh,
my favorite is please don't die.
what?
And so occasionally someone will go, we'll climb super high up and it's super dangerous, and the crowd will start chanting "Please don't die."
Oh my god. I
And
haven't
so
heard that one
it
yet.
is heartening to be like, hey, look, we love the violence, but we don't want anybody to really get hurt. That's not fun.
Right, that sucks actually. And that's the
Yeah,
whole thing about,
actually,
yeah.
that's really scary and that's sad.
Yeah, like, be careful, dude. And I think that's what is also like really uh, it's really cute about wrestling, is that we're all kind of like aware that they're hurting themselves and they're committing to these personas that are like really unlikable, some of them. But at the end of the day, we're like, okay, you're gonna get hit by a light tube. But when you're climbing up the ropes, please be careful.
Please be careful. I think that's the other thing too. Like you just saying that really makes me think. I think that's another thing. Whenever I take newer friends to wrestling, that they seem immediately won over by is that, everybody, we all hear wrestling's fake, it's predetermined, whatever. It's boring at this point. But I think when people go and experience it, they get to see that wrestlers are very self aware. Like they
Hmm.
get that you get what's going on, and then they're playing against it, they're playing with it, they're playing into it. And so I think a lot of people are just like, oh yeah, wrestlers are pretty funny generally, and they get what's going on, and
Right.
they're just going to be fun. And I think that's one of those things that really helps humanize. It's just sort of a human connection thing. You go and you see an athlete, and you're like, oh yeah, they're really good at what they do, and they're playing into how we really like to boo them, and they're just going to play it up, and that's great.
Yeah, they have a lot of jobs. Wrestlers have a lot of jobs to do. Um, and even the production of it all, like there are lights, there's video packages, there's I just it's so good. Like everything that I like is all encapsulated in a wrestling match. 100%.
100%. And it's one of those things. It's one of the few art forms for me where you can watch something be insanely funny then insanely serious. Like I've
Hmm.
definitely laughed and cried watching wrestling the same event, where you're just like, oh my god, this whatever's happening is so goofy and so over the top. And then you see Shawn Michaels super kick Ric Flair, and you know that if he pins him, Ric Flair has
Oh,
to
he's
retire
done.
for real. I cried for real, and
Oh.
it was all the same show.
Ah, I love it. I love it so much. Well, what's really fun about uh liking wrestling or just being a fan of wrestling is that I was with my parents recently, and I was talking about wrestling because I can't stop talking about wrestling at this point. It's my new personality. Sorry, everybody. Thank you, Michael. Um, and my mom was like, "Oh, when I was dating your dad in the early days, I would take him to wrestling shows as dates," which I thought was really lovely. And then I turned wrestling on and we were watching, and I watch wrestling the same way my mom does. Like she shouts the same way, she talks shit the same way, we grimace at the same time. And it's just I feel like this wrestling fan life was in me this whole time.
Yeah, and honestly, just the fact that your parents went on dates to wrestling shows, I was like, that's
Yeah,
my dream situation. Like, I don't know if your parents are looking for a third.
they might. If you like Vegas.
I'm just consider me a resource. That's all I'm saying. Like, I would
Okay.
love to take them to see GCW, and love, and I love
I'll send you
wrestling.
my mom's field profile and you can just take a look and
Perfect.
see
Thank you.
if she's putting down what you want to pick up. Michael, what what made you fall in love with wrestling?
I'm the exact opposite of what Sammy was talking about. So when they mentioned that there were two camps of people, the people who avoided it, hated it, thought it was fake. I was in the other camp. Growing up, I thought wrestling was the absolute coolest thing in the world, and I had to pretty much fight with people my entire life that it was cool and it was fun because nobody thought it was cool, especially when I was into it. I mean, I remember being a fan of it when it was super popular in the 90s, and then it fell out of fashion, and then it was really corny. And I'll to pull the curtain back, I think wrestling right now is in a really good spot. But 5-10 years ago, it was not cool to like wrestling, and it was not fun, and I liked it anyway. And I remember being at multiple friend gatherings and parties, and it somehow came up, and I had to be like, again, you just have to quietly be like, oh yeah, that's an interesting opinion, and then you're just in the back of your mind,
Oh,
it is cool, it is cool.
and this is why we started Wrestling Academy.
That's why we started Wrestling Academy, because again, the majority of those friends, I was able to take them to a show and win them over. And I would say most people that I'm friends with who were not necessarily wrestling fans, I was able to put them on a journey to where they could at the very least accept that it's cooler than maybe they had initially thought.
Yeah.
But the moment I fell in love with wrestling, we're going to have to jump all the way back to 1999. This is going to be the bulk of what we're talking about in today's episode. So let's set the scene. The year is 1999.
Okay.
No Scrubs by TLC, #1 at the billboards. The newcomer film The Matrix has just toppled the Sandra Bullock, Ben Affleck vehicle Forces of Nature to become #1 at the box office. And an 11-year-old Michael tunes in a Monday Night Raw for the very first time, where he will witness Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Hollywood megastar now, but at the time he was just The Rock. He took a man named Stone Cold Steve Austin and he threw him off a bridge in Detroit, igniting my love of wrestling forever. We're talking about the April 12th episode of Monday Night Raw. It's available on Peacock. You can literally watch it right now.
Yeah, pause the episode, watch it, then come back with us so we can, because we're gonna break it down.
This is the episode this was my very first episode. I remember being in grade school and my friends were talking about it all the time. And I was like, okay, they were doing Suck It. And I was like, what is this? What's going on? They're like, dude, it's Monday Night Raw. You got to just watch it. I tune in. This is the very first episode that I ever saw. And we're going to make the case of just if you were 11 years old, would you have fallen down the same path I did?
Sure. This is also my first episode of Raw.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. My first 1 hour, 30 minutes viewing of Monday Night Raw, and I am shook.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. I mean, I guess that's my first question. What were sort of your major takeaways from, like, because I think it's a big jump to seeing random matches to like, let me go to a specific wrestling company and check out their serialized story. So jumping right in, what were your major takeaways from the episode?
So this particular episode, there wasn't a lot of wrestling, which I was like kind of confused about, but I zoomed myself out a little bit and I looked at the story that they were telling. I was like, okay, they needed a lot of time to tell this specific story, so I'll forgive them. A lot more kidnapping than I thought was going to happen. A lot more televised flogging
Sure, yeah.
than I expected.
Some corporate sponsored flogging, which is insane.
This public flogging brought to you by Twix. 2 for me, none for
Castrol
you.
GTX. You're gonna watch a man named Christian get flogged by his bros.
Then there's I think in 1999 the world was a different place.
Way different place.
Wrestling was a different place. And I feel like
different.
Wrestling can be a time capsule of a specific year, but you have to keep in mind that it's also exaggerating everything that's happening in that time. So there was a lot of stuff that I was like, oh my gosh, this was the 90s. And I'm so glad we've moved past it.
Right. And so I guess maybe that is a good disclaimer to give before we get into it, where I think if you were not a fan of wrestling as a kid and you're like a queer person, a person of color, like a woman, I can 100% understand how like, oh yeah, this was not cool. This was not cool for me. This was not representative of me at the time. I think wrestling has evolved now and is a lot more
Thankfully.
inclusive in a lot of different ways. But for sure in the 90s, not a lot of great representation.
No.
I think pretty much something that would offend every single one of those groups happens in this episode.
Yep. Yep.
So,
If I took a tally, I would have ran out of a whole entire notebook.
okay. So, Monday Night Raw 1999. I think the major context you're going to need to understand what's going on in this episode is sort of two big things are going on. So, there's a wrestler, his name is the Undertaker. He's always been like a creepy, spooky guy, but lately he's becoming very sinister cult leadery, and he has turned his singular obsessive focus on the owner of the company, Vince McMahon's daughter. He's been taking weird stalkery photos of her. He's been following her around. He showed up to her house. He's stolen personal items from her house and burned them. Really, if you've ever seen the Mark Wahlberg movie Fear, he's basically Mark Wahlberg from Fear. It's like a really obsessive stalkery thing. And what he really wants to do is kidnap Stephanie McMahon. Now, obviously, the owner of the company, Vince McMahon, this is his daughter. He's really freaked out. He's really freaked out by what's going on. And so he's completely turned his focus away from his running Monday Night Raw responsibilities. And he's like, look, I'm the head of a group. We're called the corporation. I cannot, in good conscience, be the head of the corporation right now. I got to focus on my daughter, Stephanie, and making sure she's safe. So I'm going to hand control of the corporation over to my son, Shane McMahon. And so Shane, now he's the new head of the corporation. You can kind of tell that the power is starting to go to his head a little bit.
Uh-oh, Shane.
And he started to make some decisions that weren't cool. The most controversial decision he made is the top champion of the company, Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's won the world title, the top title in the company. He's got a custom smoking skull belt, and Shane McMahon has stolen it from him, and Vince is like, hey, give it back. We don't need any more trouble. We're dealing with this Undertaker situation. And Shane is like, oh, I'll give it back to The Rock.
Oh no.
Stone Cold's main rival. So now The Rock is walking around with Stone Cold's custom belt, his property, and Stone Cold Steve Austin is super mad about it. And that is where we jump into this episode of Monday Night Raw. So we start backstage in the locker room, and we see Vince McMahon they're in Detroit, so we see Vince McMahon surrounded by presumably a whole cadre of Detroit area police. And Vince McMahon is just sort of cradling his daughter and assuring her that everything's going to be okay.
If you were upset at Michael listing out how creepy the Undertaker was towards Stephanie, brace yourself, because Vince McMahon is even more creepy towards his own daughter, Stephanie.
It was one of those things when you said that, I was like, yeah, I don't really know how I feel about that. And then as I watched the episode, I was like, no, there's an energy here. I don't know.
There's a bad energy. There's not
a bad
great.
energy, and I don't really like what's going on. And also, it's really funny. You can kind of tell that they were like, hey, do we need to script this part out? And they're like, no, we got it. We'll just figure it out. And so it is just a lot of Vince McMahon being like, Stephanie, don't worry about it.
Settle down.
Everything's gonna be fine. Calm down, Stephanie. And
she's just sitting there.
She's just sitting there, and that's all they say to her pretty much anytime they cut to Stephanie. It's somebody being like, calm down, Stephanie. Yeah, everything's going to be fine. And her being like, okay, Dad, let's just get out of here. Or whatever. So that's going on. Vince McMahon is assuring his daughter she's going to be fine. No need to worry about anything. And so we cut to the ring where his son, Shane McMahon, now the leader of the corporation, is marching down to the ring to do a show of force. And so I think now's a good time to just get into what is the corporation. So the corporation is, in wrestling, there are groups of people, like gangs, basically. More than two people. Two people would be a tag team. A group, we call it a faction, we call it a stable. There are a lot of different names for it. But basically, the corporation is sort of a villainous group. And to understand what their what their role is, you need to sort of understand the Vince McMahon character a little bit. So this is 1999. So prior to 2 years before this, 1997, Vince McMahon as an on-screen character wasn't a thing. Nobody ostensibly knew that Vince McMahon was the owner of WWE.
That's crazy.
So he was a ring announcer, he was a commentator, but he was never looked at as the head of the WWE. And it wasn't until an event happened in 1997 called the Montreal Screwjob, which is so complicated. We're not going to fully get into it here. We'll probably talk about it later. But all you need to know is in 1997, this is sort of one of the most infamous things that's ever, like, infamous real life controversies that's happened in wrestling. And basically what happened, there's a wrestler, his name is Bret Hart, and he was getting ready to move to a rival company, WCW, from WWE. And he was the champion. And so they were basically like, okay, well, we can't have our champion go to the competition with our top title. So they're like, hey, Bret, do you mind losing? And he was like, yeah, normally I wouldn't mind, but we're going to wrestle in my hometown, and I would really prefer to win for my very last match. And so everybody became convinced that Bret was lying, and he wasn't going to uphold his end of the bargain. So everyone in the company conspired against Bret Hart to basically change the match that they had agreed on and screw Bret Hart out of a victory. Again, this sounds like a wrestling storyline, but this happened for real. And it was this whole huge controversy, and the fan reaction was so intense that the owner of the company, Vince McMahon, had to reveal himself as the owner of the company and basically just like own it. And he decided that if people hated him so much, he might as well just give them a reason to hate. And then that's where the Vince McMahon character was born. So they took a real controversy and then they translated it into a storyline. And so now Vince McMahon is sort of a caricature of a corporate businessman who's a total perv, which, you know, real stretch for Vince McMahon. But so the Vince McMahon character was always against. So that gave rise to a lot of anti-authority figures. So Stone Cold Steve Austin, very anti-authority. D-Generation X, very anti-authority. Mankind, very anti-authority. And so they would bump up against Vince McMahon all the time, who would do stuff that was unfair, and he would fire people and do all kinds of stuff like that. And so when this episode happened in 1999, Vince McMahon was 55 years old.
That's crazy.
It's insane, right? So he was 55 years old then. So Vince McMahon has gone on to have like a 10-year wrestling career. So from like 55 to 65, he had a 10-year wrestling career.
That is wild.
He can't wrestle with the intensity that real wrestlers in their primes can do. So he needed a group of people who could sort of act as proxies for him on screen. And that's what the corporation was. And so it was a way to sort of filter people in and out. We're like, okay, we like this wrestler, but he doesn't necessarily have a character yet. So let's throw him in the corporation and let's see if we can get him to a place where he can then go out on his own and be a popular superstar. It happened with a ton of people. A lot of people filtered in and out. And so I think a lot of people who wrestle in this show tonight were a former member of the corporation or were in the corporation and fighting somebody who was against the corporation. That's sort of what was going on right then.
Would you ever join the corporation?
In the 90s? Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, because it's just such this is just me personally. I love being a villain. And so there's just something that just feels so good when you're watching a wrestling show and you watch somebody turn evil.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's just something that like you boo, but deep down in my heart, I'm always like, yes, you become evil. And they're like, most of the people in the corporation did something really dastardly to get in. So would I join the corporation in 1999? You betcha.
Okay, fair.
I'd hit you with a chair immediately and join the corporation.
To join the corporation or after you join the corporation? No,
I would do it. It's just like we'd be doing Wrestling Academy, then I hit you with a chair and everyone's like, what, Mike, why? And you're like, because I wanted to join the corporation.
Slowly put on a blazer. Okay.
Yeah. So that's who the corporation is. So they're marching down to the ring at the beginning of the show. And this current iteration has Ken Shamrock, The Rock, Triple H in China, Big Boss Man, Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, who this episode does so dirty. They make them seem like bumbling goofs, but these guys were huge wrestlers in the 60s through the 80s. These guys were super tenured. So, I mean, Pat Patterson is there's a match called the Royal Rumble. He's the guy who created it.
That's crazy.
Like super decorated. He was the Intercontinental Championship, which is the secondary belt in the WWF. So like
Intercontinental.
Second most important title in the company. Pat Patterson was the very first Intercontinental Champion.
Oh, beautiful, Pat.
And then also he was one of the very first openly gay wrestlers in the sport or whatever. So he's been out since the 70s. Fucking loser.
Yeah, I literally when you're telling me this and I'm like, wait, they in this episode they look like pencil pushers. They look like office guys, and that's
they look
why
like total geeks, and they're treated like total geeks.
They really
are. I will
are.
say, my entire childhood, they were only ever the corporate stooges.
Oh
and
man.
So you would never they would occasionally show pictures of them in the 70s, but I remember as a kid being like, yeah, they probably sucked back then too. Actually, they didn't. Actually, they were awesome.
Oh wow.
And then this segment, we introduced 2 new members of the corporation, and these are the Mean Street Posse, Pete Gas and Rodney. And so their whole gimmick is they grew up on the mean streets of Greenwich, Connecticut, and they were Shane McMahon's lifelong friends. So the whole bit is that these guys are losers, and they act like they're really tough, but obviously they're not, and they've never been in a fight. And basically their job is just to get beat up all the time, and nobody likes them.
Yeah, how really tough can you be when you're wearing a damn sweater vest?
Yeah, they're wearing sweater vests, and they got bleach blonde hair.
Oof.
So corporation's in the ring, and you're expecting Shane McMahon to be like, hey, all this stuff that's going on with the Undertaker, it's not going to stand, dude. But instead, what Shane McMahon starts doing is talking about how the corporation, now that Shane is in charge, they need new blood. They need new ideas. It's out with the old, in with the new. So the very first thing Shane McMahon does is he fires Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe and brings in the Mean Street Posse.
So disrespectful.
So disrespectful. So then Shane calls Vince and Stephanie down to the ring. I think you can tell there's a little bit of jealousy on Shane McMahon's part. Being like, you're so focused on Stephanie, but meanwhile, I'm doing cool stuff with the corporation, and you're not.
When you touch my hair like that?
Yeah, you're not caressing me, Dad. You're not. It's really, if you're a fan of Succession, it really feels like Shane really feels like Kendall from Succession in this moment. So again, Shane is throwing this huge temper tantrum in the ring. He fires Pat Patterson, Gerald Briscoe, longtime friends of Vince McMahon. And Vince is really not impressed. He's like, I think he sees it for what it is. Vince is like, Shane, look, you're throwing a temper tantrum. If you want power, you've got to earn it with respect. And then Shane goes, respect this, and smacks Vince McMahon in the face and disowns him as his father.
JR and Jerry the King Lawler went fucking crazy.
They went insane, dude. The ring
that's
commentators.
Your daddy, Shane.
The ring commentators, yeah, they're like, that's your dad. That's his father. He just slapped his own father.
That boy just slapped his own father.
And then Vince is distraught. He's leaving the ring. And then this is what Shane McMahon says. And I quote, Shane goes, you're not my father anymore. You're not even Mr. McMahon anymore. You have not my respect. From now on, you are simply known as Vince, which in wrestling is just one of the worst things you can say to somebody else.
Oh, man.
Yeah, sink that in. How did that feel to, like, you're what, 5 minutes into the episode? How did it feel? Were you just like, I'm in, this is nuts?
It was so unexpected. I really don't, that slap that they replayed so many times right after and then through the episode was just so uncalled for. I mean, you know, Vince is a bad guy, but I would never.
I know.
I would never.
Me personally, I would never do that either.
I would never slap Vince McMahon. No.
I would never do like because I mean, again, I would just be like, look, he's kind of going. You never really know what somebody else is going through, but in WWE, you 100% know what everybody's going through all the time. Like if Shane
Yeah.
had just watched the show, he'd be like, the Undertaker broke into Stephanie McMahon's house,
Right.
so like that's where he's at, and for whatever reason, the police can't do anything about it. They all they can do is stand armed guard, and then if the Undertaker tries something, maybe they can do something. But while all this stuff with the McMahons is going on, we go to another member of the corporation, Ken Shamrock, most dangerous man in the world. That's his character.
Sick.
And so what happens basically is like when I first joined the corporation, I thought this was going to be a family. But a member of my family, Ryan Shamrock, last week was kidnapped by the Undertaker. And the corporation didn't do anything about it. They just stood by. They literally, I watched the episode. The corporation stood by while the Ministry of Darkness shoved Ken Shamrock into the trunk of a car.
Oh my
and then
God.
kidnapped his sister and sacrificed his sister on screen. And the corporation was like, well, hey, this could be a trap for us, dude. Let's just back off and see how this plays out. And so Ken Shamrock is really rightfully being like, hey, where the hell were you guys last week? And they were
Right.
like, and Shane is basically like, hey, man, calm down. And then slaps Vince, disowns him. Ken Shamrock has had enough. He was like, the corporation does not serve my interests. I quit. And Ken Shamrock leaves the ring.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end of the segment. We move into our very first match. And it's a 4 corners match for the women's title. So basically 4 corners is kind of what you think it is. Everybody's standing in a corner of the ring and you tag in and whoever gets the pinfall is the winner or whatever. So that's how a 4 corners match is supposed to work. So this match is between competitors Tori, Ivory, Jacqueline, and the champion, Sable. But Sable has a new bodyguard, is this huge kind of bodybuilder named Nicole Bass. And before the match can even start, Nicole Bass just starts beating everybody up. And
like
Nicole
choke slamming, right?
Yeah, she's like choking people out. She's slamming them down. She is not in the match.
You got a problem?
Yeah, and she's just yelling her catchphrase, which is "You got a problem." And so she really, I think she seems pretty unhinged. Like she just sort of barges down to the ring and is immediately like, "Do you got a problem? You got a problem?" And just starts beating people up. Beats them up so bad they can't even do the match. And then just marches up the ring being like, "You in the audience, do you have a problem? Do you have a problem, sir?"
Yeah.
I want to be clear. Women's wrestling now is good and is a viable sport, but in the 90s there's a pretty shameful history that the WWE has with their women's division, where most of the time it was relegated to a lot of curiosities, a lot of pervy chauvinistic stuff, where it's like there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of matches. There'd be a lot of bikini contests and mud wrestling and all kinds of basically making women be naked. There were tons of lawsuits that happened that were like settled. The wrestlers won, and it was like, yeah, they were being treated really poorly. I would say it wasn't until like maybe 2015 that women's wrestling really got revitalized and is now like a super cool. Not saying there wasn't good wrestling before that, but it was a lot harder to find, and people had to work a lot harder to have just regular old boilerplate matches or whatever, and the respect from the fans wasn't there. So I would say this match is pretty indicative of the kind of thing you would see in women's wrestling at the time.
Seeing as this was the first match in the episode, I want to introduce the official wrestling stopwatch, which is ideally a stopwatch that I start at the beginning bell and at the end when the bell is rung after a pinfall. As this episode has demonstrated, that is not always the case. There's going to be disqualifications and other things, like Nicole Bass, that alter when the stopwatch starts.
Right. So basically, Sammy, I think it was just that there was so little wrestling that you were like, how much actual wrestling is happening? So you got out a stopwatch to check it all out. So what is the official wrestling stopwatch on this match?
So the official wrestling stopwatch is 1 minute and 20 seconds, which is when Nicole Bass grabs Jacqueline by the throat and is stopped when Sable's theme music kicked in. Again, this match was not supposed to be even wrestled by Nicole Bass. She was just a bodyguard and wrecked everything.
Yeah, 100, 100%.
You got a problem?
Yeah, it ends with Sable's thing at the time, because she was a very sexuality forward character, and so it ends with her doing her signature grind in the ring while Nicole Bass is just like, you got a problem, you got a problem. It was like, it's truly insane to be. That's the first match. It's a minute 20, and it's just like, what the fuck was that?
It was also 20 minutes of show before this first match.
Yeah, so it's like that whole melodrama that we were talking about, that was 20 minutes. Then we go to a minute 20 wrestling match where 6 people just get beaten up, and then there's grinding, and then we're out. So from that match, we go backstage. So this is for the very first time we are introduced to the Undertaker. And basically, he's giving like a soliloquy to the camera, and how he's talking about how he wants to kidnap Stephanie McMahon, but he's angry because after Vince got slapped, he took Stephanie and they fled the arena. And so now the Undertaker is like, I was going to kidnap Stephanie tonight, but now me and the Ministry of Darkness must sacrifice another. So now I think it's the perfect time to get into, what's the Ministry of Darkness? What's going on there?
Hey, Michael. What's the Ministry of Darkness?
So glad you thank Samee. So glad you asked. So basically, what happened is, do you remember how in the late 90s, witches and Hot Topic and vampire, like Blade was super popular?
Yes.
So the WWE really wanted to lean into that with the Undertaker, and so basically, the Undertaker had always been a spooky, purple lights, rest in peace. He'd always been creepy, but this is him making a foray into being overtly evil.
Super evil.
So the Undertaker has basically become a cult leader at this point, and he started a thing called the Ministry of Darkness. Okay. And basically, it was a way to rebrand a lot of superstars at the time and make them into, and maybe revitalize them a little more. So basically, the Undertaker and his manager, Paul Bearer, Great
name.
Yeah, great name. One of my favorite managers. He's always just like, he's like a weird little weasel guy. Check out Paul Bearer. He was awesome. Rest in peace. So it's like the Undertaker, Paul Bearer, and then they recruited this tag team that were originally called Hell's Henchmen, and that was Farouk and Bradshaw, and recruited them to the Ministry of Darkness, and they got rebranded as the Acolytes. And the first thing that happened was the Acolytes kidnapped a wrestler. His name was Phineas I. Godwin, initials PIG. His gimmick was he was a farmer. He wrestled in overalls. So they kidnapped Phineas. They brainwashed him, and then Phineas became Midian.
Oh,
and then
Phineas.
The group kidnapped this wrestler. His name was Mabel. They kidnap Mabel, and then Mabel becomes Viscera. Oh. And then they incorporate this group called the Brood in, and the Brood is basically they're vampires. So,
Blade, anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the Blade influences are running deep through this group.
Oh, I love it.
So the whole point of the Ministry of Darkness is the Undertaker wanted to infect the WWE with evil, and so he wanted to kidnap people and beat them up and sacrifice them. So now we get into what is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So basically,
what is a sacrifice that can be televised in the 1990s?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's something that's like really upsetting, but not so viscerally bad that we can still show it to an all ages audience. So basically, what a sacrifice entailed at this time for the Ministry of Darkness is they would kidnap somebody, beat them up, and then they would crucify them. And so what that means is, I had to look this up. So the exact kind of cross it's a reference. It's called the Constantinian cross. So if you know the symbol, it's like P and an X, and somehow that means Jesus. So
Jesus.
Yeah, yeah, Jesus. So what they did was they took the Constantinian cross PX and they adapted it to be the Undertaker's initials. So instead of a P, it's a T, like Undertaker. And then they would strap people to that cross, and then they would lift it in front of the entire crowd, and then that means that they had been sacrificed or whatever. Again, as far as I could tell, it doesn't really do anything. They just beat you up, and then, I mean, they don't nail your hands. They just tie you up, and you go up. But if you're 11 years old it's insanely upsetting to watch. Like the week before, they kidnap Ken Shamrock's sister, Ryan Shamrock, and she gets sacrificed. So you're watching this woman shrieking, and she's up on this cross, and then it's like surrounded by like all these like grimy looking dudes, all being like,
Yeah,
and then she's just like, and it's just like it like again, I'm in my 30s, and I was like, this is uncomfortable to watch. This is so fucked up. So the Undertaker wants to do that to Stephanie McMahon, the boss's daughter. That's what he wants to do.
Evil dude.
Evil dude. But again, Stephanie McMahon has fled the arena, so now the Undertaker must look for another.
Okay.
And then that's like cliffhanger. We go to commercial. So when we come back, we now see the top champion of the WWE, Stone Cold Steve Austin, is standing in the ring, and he's like, look, The Rock has my title. He stole it. I want it back. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to come down to the ring and give it back to me. Otherwise, I'm going to come find you, and I'm going to come beat you up. Up on the big screen, we cut to The Rock, who's not in the arena anymore. He's standing on a bridge in the middle of Detroit. And is basically like, hey, Stone Cold, guess what, dude? I'm not going to come to the ring. I've got your belt. You need to come find me. If you want this back, like, he's like, you call yourself a big game hunter? Why don't you come hunt the super species, The Rock?
Oh, my God.
So then Stone Cold says the iconic line, Rock, you call yourself a super species? Well, I think you're a super feces.
And the crowd goes wild.
Yeah, people are going absolutely crazy in a way where it's like, you would think he said something cool. You know what I mean? Like, really hard.
Oh, pardon me. I think calling somebody super feces is super cool.
So you're saying that line got you? You liked that?
That line, it really got me because, previously you've been telling me about how good The Rock is on the mic and like how he can tear people down and stuff. I hadn't had much of experience with Stone Cold, and so I didn't know how good he would hold up to The Rock being The Rock. And so when he pulled out, well, I think you're a super feces, it got me. I screamed. I shouted. I probably stood up.
You kind of step back and you're like, damn, Stone Cold got him good, dude.
He is a champion for a reason.
Yeah, champion on the mic, champion in the ring, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now the challenge has been thrown down. Stone Cold has to go find The Rock by the end of the show. So he goes out of the ring, goes looking for him, and then showing up to the ring, we have one of Sammy's favorite wrestlers, Mankind. And so I guess I just wanted to ask you. This is your first time seeing Mick Foley, Mankind, in the context of when he was super popular. How did it feel? Well, first of all, for people who might not know, can you explain who Mankind is?
So Mankind is one of three personas of Mick Foley. Mankind is in sweatpants. He's got a white shirt, much like we are, but it's messy. He's got a little tie on. He's got a leather face that shows his eyes and a little bit of his mouth. His hair is wild. He's creeping around. He's an outcast. He's a little bit nutty, and he carries all of his belongings in a bag, which the imagery hit me when I was rewatching this episode. He's kind of like an anti-Santa Claus, right? And so instead of presents, we have just like dirty rags. But he is so beloved, and in this point in time, I cannot rattle off all of the titles that Mick Foley has earned, but he really is a people's champion.
He's wrestled everywhere. He's done everything.
He's really done everything. He is the hardcore champion, and he's not the prettiest wrestler as far as like movements in the ring, but he has so much heart. The first wrestling match that you showed me, or one of the first, was the iconic Hell in the Cell with Undertaker and Mick Foley, which was only in 1998, so just a year after or a year before this episode. And I mean, please check it out if you can, or please check it out yourself.
So the spot there is the Undertaker throws Mankind 25 feet from the top of a cage onto Yeah, onto the concrete floor, basically.
Yeah,
So you watch this guy fall 20 feet for real.
Mankind's tooth ends up in his nose, and he continues to wrestle. He continues to wrestle, and this is Mankind. This is Mick Foley. He is beloved.
Yeah, and when he was first introduced, it was a lot more of a deranged, unbalanced character, and so you can very clearly see that because of the Hell in a Cell match, because he's become so beloved, he's in like Chef Boyardee commercials now. And so they really had to soften Mick Foley from being this guy who would like rock back and forth and pull out his own hair and mutter to himself into like, I'm just a goofball, I'm walking around, I'm gonna go to the boiler room, like that's like they really had to do a lot of work because Mankind became so insanely popular.
Yeah.
So he's on his way to the ring. He locks himself in the boiler room because in 2 weeks he's going to have a big match with his opponent, the Big Show. And basically he's like, I want to protect the Big Show from me. So I'm going to just lock myself in the boiler room and Big Show's not going to see me. So they're like, we're going to interview Mankind after the match. So we cut to the ring and we see his opponent, the Big Show, is about to be in a 3-on-1 handicap match with members of the Brood, but they're members of the Ministry of Darkness, the Brood. And so when they get to the ring, they're all sort of wringing their hands like, we're going to make light work. There's 3 of us versus one 7-foot-tall, 500-pound monster. And then as soon as they get to the ring, the Undertaker comes over the God mic and is basically like, Edge, Gangrel, I want you two to not wrestle in this match, and I want Christian to wrestle in this match by himself, because what had been going on at the time is Christian had really been on a losing streak and had really been letting the Ministry of Darkness down. So
come on, man.
A few weeks ago, when they were going to kidnap Stephanie McMahon, but then Ken Shamrock went down to the ring. He put Christian in an ankle lock, and Christian spilled the beans, and so Ken was able to rescue her before they could fully get away with Stephanie McMahon. Then the week after this, they had the Brood fighting the New Age Outlaws, and then as punishment for giving up Stephanie McMahon's location, they flog Christian in the back. And so Christian, fresh from being flogged, stumbles down to the ring. He's not in the match, gets pulled into the ring, and then Road Dogg hits his finisher, pins Christian 1, 2, 3. Christian loses a match he's not even in. And the Undertaker is furious with him. So he's like, look, dude, if you want to prove that like you're down with the Ministry of Darkness's cause, you have to fight the 7-foot, 500-pound Big Show all by yourself. And so his Brood brothers, his teammates, Edge and Gangrel, are sort of like, oh, man, I don't know if this is such a good idea. Christian's like, no way. I got it. Stumbles into the ring. And Samee, what was the official wrestling timer on this?
The official wrestling stopwatch was 1 minute and 19 seconds. However, 30 seconds of that time was devoted to the cameras following Gangrel and Edge leaving the ring.
So the match starts, we check in with the two guys being like, this seems like a bad idea. For 30 seconds, we cut back, and then Christian pretty much almost immediately loses.
Yeah, he's smashed. Well, the Big Show is a very, very big person. When JR and the King were talking about the Big Show, they're like, oh yeah, he's 7 feet tall, he's 500 pounds. And I was just like, there's no way that they're not exaggerating. And then the camera shows the Big Show next to the referee, and I was humbled immediately, because that dude is a big freaking dude.
Well, what's really funny is there are all kinds of wrestlers that when you see them in the ring, they're like, yeah, they seem probably normal height or whatever. And then you just see pictures of them on social media with fans, and they're like a foot taller and just way more built than it's like, there are levels to how impressive people's physiques are. So again, you see the Big Show, he's in the context of the Undertaker, Kane, these huge dudes. And you're like, yeah, I mean, how big could he be? And then you see him against a regular person. You're like, no, this dude is 7 feet for real.
Yeah. Intense. So yes, this big, giant man destroys Christian with
almost immediately
in less than a minute.
Yeah, less than a minute. So as soon as the match is over, we cut backstage. We're interviewing Big Show's opponent, Mankind, in the boiler room. And Shane McMahon is watching he's watching Monday Night Raw live while they're taping Monday Night Raw, and he
Right.
sees Mick Foley in the boiler room, and he leans to his Mean Street Posse cronies and are like, "Hey, go beat up Mankind. We're not in a feud with him. We don't have a problem with him, but like, I just hate that he's in the boiler room. Go kick his ass."
Shane, come on, man.
Yeah, how well do you think that's going to go for the Mean Street Posse if you had to guess, Sammy?
Oh, I think that they're really gonna do something.
Yeah, something's going to happen to him for sure. So after this, we move to our next big match, and this is honestly, it's a match between two dreamboats. We've got one half of the New Age Outlaws, badass Billy Gunn, nicknamed Mr. Ass, versus
Hmm.
truly a fan favorite for young Michael. Young Michael gravitated to this next wrestler almost immediately, loved him, wanted to be just like him. He was fighting Val Venis. And Sammy, do you want to explain what your experience was just like watching Val Venis was, knowing that 11-year-old Mike was enthralled, wanted to be him?
I mean, I feel number one, it's not Venus the planet. It's Venus like penis with a V, by the way,
Yeah.
because nothing is subtle in wrestling, which
Yeah,
is
Val Venis's
gorgeous.
gimmick is he's a male porn star. So
Right, which I don't think that they say that uh when he's in the ring. So I don't have that context. He comes in a towel and he gyrates it off, and they're cutting to women getting really flustered in the audience. And I don't know, I'm not sold on his sex appeal, because we're
sure.
talking about how sexy and beloved he is by all these women. And then he goes onto the mic and he's like, "Hello, ladies," which, I mean, it didn't quite get me. I'm sure though, if he if he said "Hello, ladies," I'd be singing a different tune. But he said "ladies" and I couldn't do it.
Because you'd be like, whoa, hey, representation win.
Yeah. Oh, that is me.
I would say this match is what is the official wrestling stopwatch? Because this one gets a little screwy, right? It starts like a normal match, and then
Mhm.
almost immediately, the opponents that the New Age Outlaws, Badass Billy Gunn and Road Dogg, they're gonna face soon. Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart, they interrupt and they just
Oh,
start beating up Billy Gunn. How long into the match? What was the official wrestling stopwatch on this?
the official wrestling stopwatch is 3 minutes and 44 seconds, but the bell rings a disqualification when Badass Billy Gunn falls out of the ring.
Falls out of the ring and then gets jumped by Jeff Jarrett, Owen Hart. And so another
Hmm.
fun thing is Jeff Jarrett has a manager. Her name is Deborah. And so she's sort of an uptight businesswoman or whatever. So all this stuff is going on. She sort of ends up in the ring alone with Val Venus, and they have kind of
Uh-oh.
a charged moment together where he kind of starts gyrating at her, and you can see her being like, whoa,
Hmm.
oh, and you can see
Being
something's kind of
hypnotized.
unlocking in her where she's like, I'm with this dude, Jeff Jarrett. He's kind of mean. He's kind of controlling. And here I have Val Venus just pumping and gyrating at me. And maybe there's another world. But before she can fully give in, Jeff Jarrett immediately senses that something's going on, grabs Deborah by the wrist and drags her out of the ring. And that's what's going on.
Boring.
Yeah. So while all that's going on, we cut back to the boiler room. Mean Street Posse are just getting the Mankind is just beating the brakes off these dudes.
Oh yeah. Oh
These
yeah.
two chumps come in to beat up Mankind, and then they're immediately. Here's the thing: the boiler room. That's where Mankind lives in storyline. His character grew up and lives in the boiler room. That's where he feels at home. So if you really thought you were going to come into his house and not get beat up, you got another thing coming.
Oh
But
God.
the interesting thing that's happening here is while like Mankind beats the guys up, throws them out of the boiler room, and he's basically like, and then you hear whimpering, and you don't, and commentary makes it very clear that is not Mankind doing it. We don't know who's whimpering in the boiler room. Cliffhanger, cut to commercial break. When we come back, it's a tag team match between the guys who were just in the previous match, Jeff Jarrett and Owen Hart. They're fighting members of the Ministry of Darkness, the
Hmm.
Acolytes. And then what's the official wrestling timer on this?
It is 1 minute and 30 seconds, and it is another match that is ends in disqualification because the
So he runs down with a baseball bat, and he immediately is about to start laying waste. But then the Undertaker goes like, whoa, 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 whoa. Ken, your sister's in the boiler room, dude. Like, why are you fighting us? You should be tending to your sister. And so Ken Shamrock, he doesn't quite know what to do. So he turns tail. He runs for the boiler room. In the ensuing melee, they manage to get Deborah to safety. So like the sacrifice has been averted for this episode, as far as we can
thank
tell.
goodness.
Yeah. So reset, go to commercial break. Up next is a match for the Intercontinental Championship, the second most important title in the company at the time. And it's going to be a match between a member of the corporation, their enforcer, the Big Boss Man. And his character is he's like a cop, I guess. I don't know.
Boo.
Yeah, he sucked. ACAB, fuck him. And they're fighting, he's fighting the champion, Gold Dust, or so we think, because as soon, like right before the match can even start, we hear some funky bass music, and then this guy comes down to the ring. His name is the Godfather, and his character is he's a pimp, basically. So a guy comes out dressed like a costume store pimp with 5 ladies flanking him. They're sex workers, right? And then we were having a conversation before this. At the time, the sex workers are pretty liberally called the hoes. Like they were their own entity that had their own thing, and people would talk about them and reference them. So we might call them hoes a couple of times. They're sex workers, and
we're sorry.
Insanely problematic sequence, but I don't know, worthy of a little bit of discussion, because the Godfather comes down to the ring and basically is like, boss man, I got the deal of a lifetime for you. If you let me wrestle for the Intercontinental Championship instead of you, I will let you spend the night with any one of my fabulous ladies.
Gasp.
Yeah. And then and then on commentary, Jerry the King Lawler has maybe my favorite line of the night, where he's like, the boss man, he's a man of the law. He usually incarcerates hoes.
The king, come on, man.
Yeah. And he's like, so like the boss man, he's conflicted. He doesn't quite know what to do. He's like, yeah, I mean, I'm a man of the law. My duties to the corporation. I want to win the title, but at the same time, you're telling me I could have sex? and then the Godfather puts a little bit of pressure on him. He's basically like, hey, look, if you don't want to spend the night with any of my ladies, we've got the Detroit Red Wings here, and we know that they're all about this. And then they stick a camera in the front row, and the Detroit Red Wings are there, and they all have to basically be like, yeah, we'll do it, dude.
Yeah, we love it. We love sex workers.
We love this. We will have sex for sure.
Oh God.
And so like again, the boss man, it's sort of, he's softening. He's almost into it, and it isn't until the Godfather's like, hey, look, boss man, the ladies know just what to do with that nightstick. And then all of a sudden, the boss man's intrigued, because again, know what to do with that nightstick. We all know what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean, Michael?
I think it means that the nightstick is sort of a metaphor for his penis, and so they're very experienced at knowing how to operate one of those as professionals.
Okay,
so,
great, thank you.
The boss man, he's like, they know what to do with the nightstick, eh? And he looks and he goes like, all right, I'll do it. I'll let you wrestle in my place, but I want to spend the night with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but all 5 of your ladies. For that, I will absolutely wrestle in my place. And so they all like, Godfather's like, yeah, deal's a deal. I want to win the title. Let's do it. So like Big Boss Man, he leaves with all 5 ladies. And I guess, Sammy, here's a question I had for you. And I just like, this wrestling academy is a safe space. No stupid questions.
Very safe. Yep.
Okay. So do you think that the Big Boss Man is going to have sex 5 times, or would you say that he's having sex 1 time with 5 other participants? Like what, you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, is that stupid question?
I don't, no, not at all. Not at all. No. That's not a,
like, if you were the Big Boss Man and you were bragging to the members of the corporation afterwards, would you be like, hey dude, I had sex 5 times last night? Or would you be like, you guys, I totally got laid 1 time with 5 ladies last night?
I think it's definitely more impressive to say that you had group sex than sex 5 times in one. Wait. Huh.
I know, right? I was conflicted. I was watching it.
This
So
is interesting.
the Godfather and Goldust are fighting. The Godfather ends up winning the Intercontinental Championship. Good for him. But in my mind,
Good
the
job,
entire
dude.
time, I'm just like, what is what? Is the boss man having one sex right now, or is he having 5 sexes right now? Like, what is happening with the big boss man as we speak? Like, as the Godfather's winning the title, right? I in my mind, I'm just like doing the math. By the way, what's the official wrestling stopwatch on this? As we try to...
The official wrestling stopwatch for Godfather versus Goldust for the Intercontinental Championship is 4 minutes and 4 seconds. I think it's 1 sex.
You think he was like, I had sex one time last night, dude.
He had 1 group sex, yeah.
He had 1 group sex. Okay. That works for me. So
is that a weight off your shoulders?
it is, honestly, because I was like, how do you break it down? How do you quantify it? And he had 1 group sex, and that's good for him. Love that for the big boss man. But also, apparently, they all have 1 big group sex in, like, what was the stopwatch again?
4 minutes and 4 seconds.
So he has 1 big group sex in 4 minutes and 4 seconds, because as soon as the Godfather wins, the hoes come marching back down to the ring, and they all celebrate together. And presumably they were done with the big boss man, or maybe it was like, hey, we get what's up. We're gonna go.
I would like to think that they were done, because you know what, Jerry the King Lawler was very quick to insult the big boss man and go, oh well, that was really quick.
Yeah. And honestly, it's like, I want to make fun of the big boss man, but I don't know if I would fare any better if I was in a group sex situation with professionals. I don't know.
Tune in next week when we really break down.
Yeah, we're gonna put good old Mike to the test. All the shenanigans are going on. All the group sex, all the title matches are going on. Ken Shamrock makes it back to the boiler room, where he finds Mankind has discovered his kidnapped sister, Ryan Shamrock. And he's like, don't worry, Ken, I'm protecting her. Like, everything's cool. But turns out this is all one giant trap by the Ministry of Darkness. They descend on Ken Shamrock, Ryan Shamrock, Mankind, just start beating them all up. They knock out Ken Shamrock, and then they like double knock him out. They're like, they beat him up, he passes out, and then they're like, all right, get the chloroform. And then they chloroform him again when
you gotta make sure
out. And they're dragging him away, and they look at Ryan Shamrock, and on the way out, the Undertaker is basically like, by the way, this is your fault. You're like, what?
Oh, that's so rude. That's so evil. You know what?
It's like, you kidnapped me, you asshole. Like, this isn't I didn't do any of this. I didn't ask to get kidnapped. Undertaker, I didn't ask. From there, we move on to a commercial for WWE The Music Volume 3. I only bring that up because as a kid, I had that album. I listened to it all the time. Yeah, I had like a babysitter. She took the CD away from me because I would not stop playing X-Pac's theme song. I played it like 5 times in a row, and she's like, okay, that's enough music. And she took it away.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved the X-Pac theme song, dude.
How's that one go?
It's okay, so it's coming up, and it's like, X-Pac, and he's like, you think you can tell me what to do? It's like a riff on the DXM. You think you can tell me what to wear? You think that you're better get ready, bow to the master, suck it. And it's like kind of a more rap version of the DX theme song, but I loved it, dude.
Wow.
Yeah. So after the commercial, we go back to the ring, and it's a hardcore title match. And so what makes hardcore title different than other titles is you can use weapons, you can cheat, you can go anywhere in the arena as long as you get a pinfall. Like, rules are very loose, and it's between D'Lo Brown versus Hardcore Holly. And so the specter sort of looming over this match is there's a wrestler named Al Snow, and he's accompanied by a mannequin head, which he named Head. And so they're at commentary, and they're keeping watch over Hardcore Holly, because in 2 weeks' time at the big pay-per-view event, Al Snow and Hardcore Holly are going to fight. And he's basically like, no one's going to take that title off of Hardcore Holly except for me. So while this is going on, anytime D'Lo Brown starts to do well, Al Snow will sneak into the ring and sort of even the odds, which again, because it's a hardcore match, that's legal.
Anything goes.
So eventually Bob Holly ends up winning. Hardcore Holly wins, retains the championship. and we move on for another day. So we're one step closer to Al Snow and Hardcore Holly fighting in the big match. So that's happening. We finally cut to the bridge, and we see The Rock has just been sort of waiting around for Stone Cold Steve Austin. And you can tell he's getting kind of bored, and he finds a fishing pole on the ground. And he's like, oh, good. Oh, thank God. And so he starts lamenting the fact that he wishes Stone Cold Steve Austin was there, because if Stone Cold Steve Austin was there, he would put Stone Cold's candy ass on the end of his line and cast him out into the river and catch a fish, because The Rock is an avid fisherman. But he's like, yeah, but knowing my luck, I would probably catch some mutated freak fish if I use Stone Cold as bait.
Oh, wow.
Because Stone Cold is such a candy-ass piece of trash. And I guess this is a good time to say, The Rock says piece of trash like so many times during the... Yeah, you piece of trash.
You piece of trash.
Piece of trash.
Piece of trash.
Piece of trash.
You piece of trash.
So it's like, okay, it's like we just need to check in with The Rock. He's still on the bridge. He thinks Stone Cold's still a piece of trash. So back in the arena, we finally see the Ministry of Darkness about to do a sacrifice.
Oh my God.
And so basically what that means is the kid, Ken Shamrock, who they've kidnapped earlier, they've dragged onto the ramp, and they've set out the Undertaker's symbol, the T with the X, and they've tied Ken Shamrock to it. And all they need to do is raise it, and he's been sacrificed. But as we've established, the Undertaker is a villain, and so he changes things at the very last minute, and he goes, "We're not going to have one sacrifice; we're going to have two, because Christian, you failed me. You gave up Stephanie McMahon when we were going to kidnap her. Like, you lost to the New Age Outlaws. You lost to the Big Show earlier tonight. You're getting sacrificed as well. And if that's not enough, what we're going to do is we're going to have your Brood brothers show their loyalty, because they're going to be the ones to sacrifice you."
That's so rude.
The Brood is like, whoa, we didn't agree to this. And you can see the gears turning in their mind. You're like, you know what? We quit the Ministry of Darkness. And the entire Brood, Edge, Christian, Gangrel, start fighting the Ministry of Darkness.
Yes.
They're like, you're not going to sacrifice Christian tonight. They're doing it. Mankind runs out, and he starts fighting him too. And there's this whole huge melee going on. And Samee, you would say there's like, what, 15 people on the ramp or something like that?
At the very least, 15 people, yeah.
And everyone is just chanting for Mankind. Like,
yeah, this is how beloved this guy is.
He was not involved in this at all. Undertaker is on the ramp, and he descends into a pit, and smoke comes out, and he just makes a James Bond level escape here. So from here, we go into the final match of the night. It's for the tag team titles, and it's between two members of the corporation, Triple H and Test, versus a brand new, very unlikely tag team in X-Pac, the guy whose theme song I was singing earlier, and then this other wrestler named Kane. And do you want to just kind of visually, what did Kane kind of look like?
Kane was one of a taller wrestler. I think he's probably 7 feet tall, dressed in all red, like patent leather. He's got black, kind of like a black stripe across his chest diagonally, hair wild, and he is another wrestler who is like an outcast, a creepy like persona, and they also call him, like, think that he's like a dumb monster type situation. So
yeah, he's kind of treated a little bit term when referring to Kane, the Big Red Machine. So another thing that's kind of interesting about the Kane character is in the world of the WWE, Kane is the Undertaker's long lost brother.
Say it ain't so.
And basically, when the Undertaker was a kid, he set the funeral home they both lived in on fire, and Kane was presumed to be dead. And so that's why Kane wears the mask and stuff. Kane was originally in the corporation, as like an enforcer, where it's like, oh, Kane, he's sort of like a Frankenstein thing. We can sort of mold him and have him do whatever. But then he was betrayed by a member of the corporation China, who also used to be in D-Generation X with X-Pac. And so when
China, come on, man.
China defected, she brought over the leader of D-Generation X, Triple H, into the corporation. And so X-Pac and Kane sort of have this like mutual thing where they're like, we're both kind of outcasts, we're both kind of weirdos, and we've both been screwed over by China and Triple H, and like this isn't cool. And so they formed an unlikely tag team, and sort of disappears as soon as our matches are over, but he shows up when I need him to, and he's there when I need him to. And so as long as he's there when I need him, like that's all I need. So it's like they're very clearly at the beginning of their friendship. And so you can see them becoming a little bit more comfortable with each other. And so I think as the match is going on, do we have an official wrestling stopwatch on this?
Yes, it is 6 minutes and 26 seconds uninterrupted.
Okay, so that's like a pretty good, pretty legit little TV match.
Yeah, that's the
good.
longest one.
So, all right, so Samee, X-Pac's signature move, it's called the Bronco Buster.
Yeah.
Do you want to, how did you feel seeing it?
Well, you're such a big fan of X-Pac, and when you talk about the Bronco Buster, you seem very scandalized by it every time. You're like, oh man, it's so rude. But seeing it for the first time, I thought it was pretty jovial. I thought it was kind of fun. Because the move, he slams his opponent into the turnbuckle, so they're in the corner. Then he gallops over and throws his legs on either side of his opponent, and then bounces up and down.
Yeah, I mean, he's rubbing his dick and balls in the guy's face.
Is he really?
He is.
There's a lot of space, because I don't know.
He jumps in, and he's like, the person's here, and he just jumps in and is like, like he's just thrusting like crazy in this person's. It's just so like.
I don't think
it's salacious. I just think it's disrespectful.
There's more thrusting from Val Venis than X-Pac.
Okay. I guess I just wanted to, as a just a fun fact about wrestling, what would you do if I told you that in 2012 X-Pac tried to do the Bronco Buster and tore his anus and,
no,
and almost bled out and almost like seriously died doing the Bronco Buster?
No way.
Still think it's cool, Samee?
I mean, no, but really?
Really? Yeah. But hey, look, 20 years before that happens, X-Pac's in the prime of his career right now, winning and retaining the tag team championship titles with Kane. So, end of the night, Ken Shamrock comes down to the
Don't die. Please don't die.
Please don't die. And so finally, the corporation, they show up and they pull Ken Shamrock out of the ring. And you're like, okay, I know Ken Shamrock quit at the beginning of the show, but they've come to their senses. Like they at one point were friends. They had feelings for each other, or so we thought, because as soon as the corporation pulls Ken Shamrock out of the ring, they just start beating him up. And then this is what I was really concerned about. The big boss man comes down to the ring, but again, it's like the guy, he's got no afterglow. He's got no like post-nut swagger. And this guy presumably had group sex with 5 people. And he's just like uptight walking down to the ring, and he just starts choking a guy out with a nightstick. You're like, I don't think this guy did have sex. I think, or if he did, I think he came immediately. I think this guy's a loser.
Yeah, because he sucks. He's a cop.
I just wish that there had been a little bit of like, you know, if you had, all right, time to beat up Ken Shamrock. You know what I mean? Like, I was just wanting that, and I just noticed it, and I was like, oh, I don't think this guy actually did have sex, actually.
Well, you know what though? This plays into the one sex theory versus the five sex theory. Well, does it? Because I guess if you come 5 times, you will be tired and not have any swagger.
So you're saying, oh, you're saying he had so much sex he was tired and was just like, I guess I just gotta get
He
my
had
job
so
done.
much sex in 4 minutes and 4 seconds that
I'm just saying,
yes,
like, it would have been cool. Like, if that were the case, then maybe come out with a water bottle of like, oh, man, I'm so
Gatorade.
tired. Yeah, really, just like, oh God, I really just got to get this over with and get home because I'm so tired. But again, he just walked down like a
He's
nerd,
just
and
a
I'm just
loser.
saying, boss man, we see you, we see what you're all about.
Not a boss to me, bro.
Not a boss to us, dude.
Mm-mm. Just tisk.
Anyways, so the corporation pull Ken Shamrock out of the ring, start beating him up.
Rude.
And so Ken Shamrock has just been getting beaten up all night. And then at the ramp, we see the leader of the corporation, Shane McMahon, just twirling his sunglasses like a villain. And everything blacks out. We're back on the bridge. End of the night. The Rock has been waiting for an hour and a half for Stone Cold Steve Austin to show up. And he hasn't shown up all night. So The Rock, he's frustrated at this point. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to throw Stone Cold Steve Austin's title off the bridge and be done with this.
So rude.
And so bridge, Stone Cold catches himself. But then The Rock hits Stone Cold with his own signature taunt, which is throwing up the middle fingers. So in wrestling, when you steal somebody's taunt and use it against them, it's ultimate disrespect. But then
So
The
rude.
Rock compounds the disrespect by saying, I think go fuck yourself, you piece of shit. And then he punches Stone Cold in the face. Stone Cold falls off the bridge, lands to the splat. And then The Rock picks up Stone Cold's title, spits on it, and he goes, you want your title? Why don't you take it to hell with you? And he throws it off the
Oh my
bridge. And 11-year-old Michael was hooked for life because that is the end of Monday Night Raw. That's how it ends, dude.
I can't believe it. Like when I watched it on Peacock and it ends so abruptly, I was like convinced that there was more episode that like wasn't available, but that is the actual end.
Yeah, ends on that cliffhanger. And so you got so juiced up, you watched the next episode. What happened?
Okay, so I'm just gonna tell you that I didn't take notes, so this is all just from my heart. The Rock shows up in a hearse, and his plan is to bury Stone Cold. So he's got the hearse. He has a grave dug, and there's
In the
also a
arena.
coffin.
He's doing all this in the arena. He's got a hearse, grave dirt, a headstone.
Yeah, grave dirt, and so like there's like a little mountain even that he stands up and he's like trying to call out to Stone Cold, and he's like when you show up, you're gonna go in this grave, idiot, and you piece of trash, and he eventually reveals that he has the title, and it is like the crowd's like, what the F is this? Throughout the episode, The Rock is bragging about this new Lincoln that he got. This new
Just got, like, a
Lincoln
brand new
Town
car.
car. Beautiful Lincoln Town car in the 1990s.
Yeah,
And
it'd be a shame if anything happened to that.
it would really be a shame if anyone did anything vengeful to this car. It was $40,000. We all know
A
because
king's ransom in 1999.
the Jerry the King Lawler said it was $40,000. The Rock brags on the phone. That's $40,000. At one point, it cuts to him in a dressing room where he's practicing the eulogy for Stone Cold. And this struck me because he was like, dearly beloved, we're gathered here. No. Dearly beloved, no. You white trash. But by the end of the episode, he's like, well, Stone Cold's not gonna show up. I'm just gonna bury his title. And we cut to the outside because the cameras were pointed outside for Stone Cold's arrival. And Stone Cold does, in fact, arrive in not a regular car, but a monster truck, 316 monster truck. And he's revving the engine. And then we don't know what's going to happen with this monster truck. And we're like, what? Okay, great. He hops out of the monster truck, which I've actually never seen anybody exit a monster truck, but you go basically where the seats are, you just slide right down. So he slides right down. There's a parking attendant. He's just like, hey, is this The Rock's new car? And the parking attendant's like, yeah, sure is, buddy. Stone Cold
That's a chill parking attendant right there.
yeah. Stone Cold somehow enters The Rock's car because it wasn't locked, The Rock. And we're like, oh, why is Stone Cold getting into this car? Is he just going to drive it off? Is he going to steal this brand new $40,000 Lincoln? He gets in, he reverses it, and he parks it in front of the monster truck. Scrambles right back into the monster truck. And we think he's going to run it over, right?
Yeah, of course.
At first, he does not run it over. He goes around it, and then
The Rock is probably like, whoo.
Yeah, they're cutting to The Rock, so it's going back and forth between the monster truck and The Rock. And he's like, what are you doing? There's a new car, blah, 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 blah. Stone Cold runs it over once, reverses, runs it over again. And at this point, the car is flat. It's flattened. I thought it was over.
$40,000 pancake right there, dude.
Yeah, truly. It is not over at this moment. Stone Cold drives the monster truck into the fucking arena and runs over the hearse that The Rock drove into the arena earlier. So he runs over the hearse. Stone Cold is rushed by The Rock, and Stone Cold administers an incredible beating. Like, he's throwing The Rock into the guardrails, into the truck, into the hearse, back into some guardrails, into some of the gearboxes or whatever. And he throws The Rock into the grave, grabs a cooler of beer, chugs a beer, and then pours other cans of beer into the grave itself. Out of nowhere, Shane McMahon shows up, bashes Stone Cold with a shovel so hard that the shovel breaks. He takes the title from Stone Cold. End of episode.
Unbelievable, dude. Yeah.
And that's only the Stone Cold and the Rock parts of the episode. Miss Deborah's puppies were wagered. Like, it's a whole thing. Highly recommend watching it. It's a great follow-up to this episode that we dissected, because there's also a lot more wrestling in this episode too.
A lot more wrestling and nice continuation. So if you would like a little bit of homework from Wrestling Academy, why not jump ahead to the April 19th episode of Monday Night Raw immediately after the April 12th episode and see how you feel. And so again, I guess, Samee, wrapping up, sort of final thoughts about the episode. It's your first one. How did it feel going through that whole gauntlet of everything you experienced?
It felt good to get context. It felt like I can see how 11-year-old Michael was hooked off of this. I will say, though, that there was so little wrestling that me now, because of all the matches and stuff that we've watched, have been really wrestling based or wrestling focused, that watching that I was a little disappointed in how little we got. But the move of the episode for me was Val Venis's beautiful uppercut administered to badass Billy Gunn. So much kidnapping, so much more kidnapping than I thought. So many double crosses, triple crosses, sex workers, Bronco Buster. Like, how can you not be excited by this episode of Raw?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say at this stage of time, I think the emphasis was a lot more on the soap opera aspect of it than the in-ring action. So there are lots of different generations of WWE, just like stretches of time. There's like the golden age, there's the new generation. This was called the Attitude Era, which was a lot more salacious and a lot more soap opera focused. Like there are definitely periods of time where it's a lot more in-ring focused, and I would say that's where we're at right now. So if you like in-ring action, then don't worry. We're definitely going to talk more about that in subsequent episodes. But it was just nice to check in. And again, I was really thinking it was going to be fully so cheesy. I wasn't going to be able to stand it. But I remember being like, no, I fully understand, like, A, why I got into it. And then B, it made me want to go back and watch more of those classic episodes because it was just so unbelievably crazy.
Yeah, it is wild. And like, to be completely honest, like watching the episode that came after, like I feel like I'm just going to continue watching all of the Raws in order from here. And that's one of the things about wrestling that's like people don't really know is that you can jump in anywhere. But you know, that's how where Wrestling Academy comes in, is that we're giving a little bit more context so that you can understand and not feel overwhelmed at all of the stuff that you missed.
Yeah, I think if you just jump in, that's what I did. I mean, again, I was a kid. I had no context. I jumped into this episode, then I just kept watching every episode. And it does a good job of letting you know what you need to be paying attention to. But again, it's like there was a lot of stuff I didn't get until I watched a couple more episodes to be like, oh, okay, great. This is why this is important, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So if you want to get into Monday Night Raw, again, I think April 12th is a great place to start. But incredible. If you literally just jump into it right now, you'll within a week or two you'll be all caught up, and it'll be as though you have always been watching wrestling, and that's just kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So Samee, that was Wrestling Academy episode 1 in the books. How do you feel? Any major takeaways?
I'm just so happy we're doing this, and like all of the context that you provided was so helpful. Like that thing about Vince McMahon actually not being all, like, I always thought that he was just Vince McMahon, the character, this whole time. So knowing that he really wasn't until a couple of years prior to this was really interesting. I am beside myself. I don't know how to quite articulate how I feel about this episode, but I'm just so happy.
Perfect for a podcast.
Yeah. I'm just so happy that we're doing this, and tune in next week for when we break down the first wrestling match that I watched live and ever. It is GCW's America's Most Wanted.
Yeah. So for next week, we talked about the moment that got me to fall in love with wrestling. So now we're going to break down what made Samee fall in love with wrestling. So we're going all the way back to 2022 for GCW's America's Most Wanted. Dude.
I'm new here. Stop.
No, it's fine. It's good. And again, that'll be like a almost completely different than what we were just checking
Incredibly
out. So
different.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to kind of compare and contrast just based on everything we know. So
yeah.
That's Wrestling Academy. Like, if you liked this, go ahead and like follow us, give us a 5-star rating. We're on Spotify. On Spotify, we got Q&As, we got little polls. So if you want to get involved, let us know. Like, if there was a moment that made you fall in love with wrestling, let us know, because Samee's so new that anything you say will be good guidance for them to just get more into it. So you can follow us on our socials. We're on YouTube if you want to watch the video version of this. We got Instagram. We got TikTok. You know the deal. Tell your friends, and tell your boss to fucking suck it, dude.
Suck it! Class is dismissed!
Bye.